understand how we get from just getting flicked off in a parking lot to, you know, a car chase. What is up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's your girl JD here, back with another video, and today we are going to be discussing the newest TV show over on Netflix. I believe it is a Netflix original, but do correct me in the comments if I am wrong on that one. But it is called Beef. It is starring a few notable actors and actresses that I have seen before, and one in particular who is kind of like the main star. I'm not entirely sure if I could say she's an actress, but she's more so a comedian. So y'all let me know if I'm wrong, and like maybe there's like more stuff that she's been in, but I think this might be her first acting gig. But let's get into the star-studded slash semi-star-studded list, okay? First we have Ali Wong. So she is the person that I was talking about her being a comedian. I've never seen her in anything before this show. So next we have Steven Yeun, who I remember distinctly playing Glenn in The Walking Dead. He was kind of the reason why I stopped watching The Walking Dead, if I'm going to be honest, because after they took him out, I was like, I'm done. Then we have David Cho, Young Mazzino, who I've never really seen in anything before. I've only actually seen Steven and David Cho before. Joseph Lee and Ashley Park, who we've seen on, geez, I think it's Emily in Paris. I think that's the name of the show, right? Yeah, Emily in Paris. I actually did a video on that show as well. If you'd like to check that out, I'll put it in the corner here. And of course, Maria Bello. So Beef was pretty interesting. I'm not gonna lie, the premise was very strange. It is categorized as like a comedy drama series. So I'm just kind of like, how do you make comedy into a drama? You know what I mean? I was very intrigued by that. It says two strangers get into a road rage incident that brings chaos into their lives. And literally just that one sentence alone, I was like, how is there chaos? What chaos are we talking about? And when you watch the show, you understand exactly what type of chaos they're talking about. So I ended up getting an 8.2 out of 10 on IMDb, but it seems as though people were kind of gelling with it so far. When I watched it, it had just came out maybe like a week ago. I kind of heard some people talking about it, but not really. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a chance, because it was like so intriguing to me, both the cast and the storyline, because the sentence is so short and to the point. You're just like, okay, I need more context. I need to know what exactly went down in the show, but literally verbatim what they said happens in the show. That was so succinct and accurate, it's crazy. But let's get into it, my thoughts and all that good stuff. So we have Amy and Danny. They're played by Ali Wong and Steven Yeun, like I mentioned, and they're the two main characters. They're the two strangers that they're talking about in the write-up of the show. The first scene we see is Danny in a, looks like some type of department store. He's trying to return something. He's in the returning line and he forgets his receipt. So he goes back into his truck, kind of upset that he's like, I can't find my receipt. He tries to pull out of the parking space that he's in, and as soon as he tries to pull out, there's a car that comes right behind him that's trying to get out of the lot, and she just decides to sit there and beep for at least a minute or 2 minutes, which is like, why? Usually it's just like a quick like, The fact that she sat there and actually decided to keep her hand on the horn for that long was like, are you having a bad day? Like, what's going on? This is first coming from Danny's perspective. So the first episode, we see Danny's perspective of the incident. He's in his truck. After the 2 minutes of honking the horn, Amy drives off. But at the time, of course, they don't know each other. So Danny just sees this person as a stranger. As Amy's driving off, she decides to flick the middle finger off at Danny, and Danny's just like, what the hell is your problem? And he was already having a rough day. You could tell he was like not into it at all. But in this moment, it was just the last straw for him. He was done. He decides to pull out of his parking space and drive off into the distance behind Amy. They're both driving off into traffic, weaving in and out of the traffic. Looks like they was about to cause a crash or two, but thankfully they didn't. They ended up going through a neighborhood. I don't understand how we get from just getting flicked off in a parking lot to, you know, a car chase. It escalates really quickly in this story. He, you know, couldn't catch up with her like that, so she ends up throwing a milkshake on his window. He couldn't really see, so he was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna stop and get your license plate number. I'm gonna remember it for later on. He comes home and of course he's outraged. He meets up with his brother who lives with him. That's young Mazzino's character, Paul. So Paul, he's kind of like a semi-loser, but we find out it's not really by choice. It's because of some things that ended up happening. His older brother, Danny, you know, him doing some things. We're gonna hop into that later. Paul, you know, he's at the house. He doesn't really care for his brother like that, but he's just like, you know what, you know, I feel indifferent. Obviously, when it comes to money, you know, Danny's not doing too well. And also it seems like Paul's not really doing much, but he got some money from like crypto or something like that. And Danny's trying his best to keep him from spending that money. But then we find out that, you know, later on, after Danny tries to buy a house with the money, crypto ends up crashing. So it was just kind of like, huh, that's very representative of the times. Crypto is kind of in the trash. So Danny and Paul come from a Korean family, and I think that their parents were actually hotel owners at one point, but they ended up having to sell the hotel. Everything went under financially, and the parents had to end up going back to Korea. Danny's promising like, hey, I'm gonna get you a house, I'm gonna get things together, and he's telling all these outsiders and also his parents and a few family members like, you know, I got good business, things are going well, but really and truly he was a contractor doing odd jobs here and there, but the money was not flowing for him at all. And then we get to Amy's character, who is the complete opposite. We eventually see her perspective on the incident as well, but later on down the line. Amy, she, I believe, is maybe an art dealer or an artist. I don't know, but I think her husband is an artist, and I think maybe she's the art dealer. I have no idea. It's a lot of things that's just kind of like, are you? I don't know what you do exactly. Like I said, it's the complete opposite for Amy. She has no problems with money. She's trying to close a multi-million-dollar deal with Jordan. And Jordan obviously is kind of like a standoffish billionaire. She keeps giving Amy the runaround with certain things. And then that's also when Naomi comes in, because Naomi is friends with Amy, and it was such a weird interaction that they had with each other, because it was almost like a frenemies type of thing. Like, we're friends, but I could tell you judge me on the side, you know? So with Amy, she wasn't really, I guess, as present as she wanted to be with her child's life. She's a mom, she has a daughter. And also Naomi, I think, had a kid as well around the same age as Amy's. So that's kind of, I guess, how they connected with each other, maybe because they're both moms. But it seemed as though they were kind of in the same circles as well, because we find out that Naomi is Jordan's sister-in-law, and she keeps mentioning that throughout the show. Whenever we see her, she mentions like, hey, we're friends, and also don't forget, Jordan's my sister-in-law. And it's just kind of like, girl, is that your identity? You know what I'm saying? For some reason, when people, I guess, marry into rich families, they have to keep mentioning, you know, these people so that their status could be elevated. It's just really strange. So like I said, their dynamic is odd, because you could tell Amy, she got it from the mud. And with Naomi, it seems as though she just kind of married into a good family and just automatically got things. It also seemed as though Amy, when it came to her husband, also we find out some things about him a little later, but you know, First of all, we are going to talk about the fact that her husband was an artist, and we find out that his dad was also an artist, but a very rich one and a very well-known one before he passed away. However, it does look as though Amy doesn't really care for his work like that. But she doesn't want to tell him that it's ugly and that's not selling, you know what I mean? So it's really funny. His mom comes into play. She doesn't really care for Amy like that. It's kind of like a monster-in-law situation a little bit. But we find out that Amy's husband's mom is having financial issues because the son, okay, Amy's husband, doesn't really want to sell his father's things, his art pieces. And it's just kind of like, okay, why? So she's struggling with that, and then also she has some issues being a parent, okay, being present while also trying to balance her work and all that stuff, trying to close a multi-million-dollar deal, trying to sell her business basically. So there's a lot of things going on in her life. However, she's not really struggling financially, just the complete opposite of Danny, who is like living barely above the poverty level at this point, like check to check. And you could also see he tries his best to do really crazy jobs like cutting gigantic trees, and he's just like, you know, how did I get here? You know what I mean? He has kind of like a moment of I feel like a loser basically. He ends up looking up Amy's license plate, which is so strange because it was like, how do you go from just coming out of a parking lot to getting flicked off to going on a car chase to now looking up this person's license plate, their address, and then we find out that after he found the address, he goes to Amy's house, only Amy was there, and he basically comes and says, hey, I'm a contractor, you have some problems with whatever was on your house, right? And she's just like, now you know I have a gun. And it's like, girl, I don't understand how this changes anything. If he wanted to hurt you, he probably still would. So again, it's like, why would you invite a stranger into your house when it's just you in the house? You know what I mean? It was a little too trusting for me, okay? But she lets Danny into the house, and he tries to kind of fake inspect the house and be like, hey, you have this, this, and that going on, this problem, moisture on the walls, I think is what he said. And he's just like, hey, can I use your bathroom? And she takes that time while he's in the bathroom to call the husband and be like, hey, I got a contractor here, and he's saying that this, this, and that is wrong with the house. So it should be good because he'll come back and fix it. So the husband's just like, oh, okay, cool. And he comes out of the bathroom and he's just like, hey, I gotta go. And he's running out the door, and Amy comes and looks in her bathroom and finds out that this man had pissed all in her bathroom. I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, genuinely confused. She's just like, why would you do that? So she runs out of the house trying to chase him, and he starts running and then turns around and flicks her off. And it's just like, what? It's just so petty. I find it so crazy how just from this, they start going back and forth with each other. And it's just like, for what? For what? It just escalates from petty to really petty to pettiest. He hadn't really accomplished anything though. Yes, he got her back for doing what she did to him, but it was like, you're still stuck in the same situation, the same life. It changes nothing for you. You know, he's still trying to borrow money from his cousin. His cousin ended up pretty much taking his business, like owning it, owning him. And it was like, Danny, how did we get here? Just wish he had someone in the show to be like, you're doing too much, this is not you, right? And we find out also that his cousin had went to jail before. I don't remember if it was like drug dealing or stealing or what, but it was for something that clearly lasted a couple years. Like, it landed him a couple years in prison. He comes out and decides to do similar criminal activities. Danny again gets kind of connected to him, and now he owes him, and he got in more and more debt, and then eventually he had to just give his cousin the business. Shortly after that, Amy does come back into contact with Danny, but actually through his brother. We also find out that Amy's husband is cheating on her throughout this whole thing with Mia, who's supposed to be kind of like Amy's, I guess, assistant. And I'm like, what? But we find out, you know, that it wasn't really physical. It was just emotional, he says. However, we have a whole scene with him basically jacking off to, you know, her picture on Instagram. But anyways, Amy, she ends up catfishing Danny's brother Paul, and she uses Mia's picture, her assistant, yet again. She uses a couple pictures from her Instagram, and she gets Paul involved. Paul's just like none the wiser, you know, he's just like, yeah, she's a really cool chick, but it's Amy the entire time. And then he finds out that it's actually Amy and not Mia, because he shows up at Amy's place of work. It's such a hot mess. Oh my god. She's trying to get to Danny through his brother, but the brother ends up getting attached to her, and he becomes a liability basically. Obviously Paul is really young. He was of age. However, it was a matter of him being really young, and it looked kind of bad considering that you're also a married woman. Yeah, Amy doesn't want to let anything go. She wants to continue to pursue Danny. However, she's trying to cut Paul out of things and be like, hey kid, leave me alone. The thing is with Amy, she's trying her hardest to forget this whole road rage incident. However, it keeps coming up. There was one time when they were in Vegas. Paul went to meet up with Amy in Vegas when she had some type of conference to go to, and Danny finds out Paul had taken the truck, his only vehicle to drive around, so he had to go to Vegas to get the keys. And obviously he brings his cousin Isaac. They're trying to look for Paul in this massive hotel, and they end up coming across Amy during her conference, and then they pretty much get arrested. And I think Isaac had ended up getting a couple years or something like that again, but then he ended up getting released somehow. Because the truck was now under Isaac's name, I think he had ended up going down for the road rage incident. So basically before that, Amy was trying to pay Danny off so that he wouldn't say anything because it started becoming a problem. Naomi also started getting involved as well. There was videos and pictures here and there of the incident. She would just come to Amy every now and again and be like, hey, I know what you did. Kind of blackmail her a little bit, but not really. We see also that Amy's husband's mom, her mother-in-law, is trying to take up for her by saying that it was her. So it was a lot of people trying to cover up for her and also cover up for Danny, but I think with Danny's case, they ended up just putting everything on Isaac. So Amy was like, hey Danny, I don't need to pay you off anymore, and he was like, no, like I still need the money, you know what I mean? But she's just like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. But Danny just could not let it go and leaves Isaac in jail. You know, he's just like, yeah, I'm totally gonna tell the truth, it was me. Nah, Isaac just ends up staying in jail. So basically, Isaac has a vendetta. As soon as he gets out of jail again, he's just like, I'm coming for you. Danny is just like living his best life. And he also tried to run kind of like an insurance or mortgage scam. And he ended up meeting back up with his ex-girlfriend from years ago. Lord, it's so much. But anyways, his ex-girlfriend, we find out is married. She's pregnant. She ends up inviting him to their church because first Paul and Danny tried to ask like, hey, do you need a contractor? Do you have any work for us to do around the house? But husband, who's clearly uncomfortable with the fact that this is your ex-boyfriend, you know, I'm not gonna have him working around our house. He's just like, you know, you're welcome to come around the church sometime that we go to, but that's about it. We don't need you. When Danny starts going to the church for real, they end up getting into some type of competition with each other, and clearly you could tell that this wife of his is smitten with Danny. It's becoming rather problematic, but that's kind of like a side story. He's trying to do all these things to make money. So when obviously Amy was like, hey, I'll pay you off so you don't say anything about the whole road rage thing, he was already jumping on it. So when she decided to take it back, he was like, no. He ultimately decides to befriend her husband, George. And George is none the wiser because he never actually found out who the contractor was responsible for peeing in their house. When George and Danny become friends and George just inviting him over to their house, Amy sees him and he's just like, what is it gonna take for you to get out of my life? Eventually, you know, they pretty much just decide to just leave each other. But again, it becomes another problem because not only does Danny not let things go because it escalates somehow, he finds Amy's car. He tries to set it on fire. Because Amy finds out that George, her husband, is cheating on her, she decides to go to counseling, or they decide to go to counseling anyway. And they leave their child in the car. And I'm just like, why? Why would you leave your child in the car? You know what I mean? It's just so many things here and there that I'm confused about. So they left their child in the car while they're doing this counseling session. And Danny finds the car and he tries to set the car on fire. And I think this was after Amy had actually found Danny's car or truck and vandalized it. So he had to repaint it and pay money to do all that. So he was like, you know what, I'm coming after you, okay? So he comes after the car and he tries to set it on fire, but then he realizes obviously their daughter is in the car. So he's just kind of like, okay, whatever, I'm just gonna leave it. But eventually, George had found out that Danny was actually the person that Amy was talking about the whole time. So when Danny came over to bring him like a present of some sort, he was like, who are you? You lied to me, basically. So he has a gun. He answers the door with a gun. He puts his daughter in the car. He answers the door with a gun, points it at Danny. They get into a scuffle, And then I think George had bumped his head and went unconscious. So Danny tries to leave, but the police were already called, so he had to leave in one of the cars that were already there, one of George's cars. And he finds out that obviously in the backseat was George and Amy's daughter. Because he had to come all the way home with the daughter is there at his apartment, and Isaac is released from prison around that time. And he comes in and he's like, oh, we're going to use her as leverage, okay? We're going to use her to get this money. So basically they hold this child for ransom. Amy, she gets a call from Isaac and she's just like, okay, I am friends with Jordan, or I'm at Jordan's house. Do you know who she is? She's a billionaire. Come to her house. She has this collection. You could steal everything and sell it. Because she didn't have the cash on hand and wasn't going to be able to get the cash in time, she was like, yeah, just come steal the stuff. Jordan, knowing none the wiser, Amy is just hanging around for as long as possible to make sure that they get what they need. We find out also that Naomi decides to leave her husband for her sister-in-law, Jordan. Okay, so they're now dating. It's very strange. They kidnap the girl. They're holding her for ransom. So now they're heading to Jordan's house. They reach Jordan's house. They have the little kid with Danny and Paul in a car a couple miles away. Jordan and Naomi, they try to escape, but Jordan doesn't get into the safe room fast enough. And Naomi's just like, screw you. Like, someone's coming behind you. They might try to kidnap us or kill us, you know? So basically Jordan ends up getting caught in the door. And I'm just like, oh, I didn't need to see that. So she basically gets cut in half. And I'm like, oh my God. So she's dead now. She's dead. We see that before then, Amy finds out that not only is her child kidnapped and the ransacking thing for them to steal is going wrong because the alarm is sounding, Amy finds out that the kidnappers are connected to Danny. Oh, and she's just like, you again? So yeah, they try to lock Danny and Paul outside because Danny and Paul had actually gotten away from one of Isaac's men, basically, where they were keeping them, like holding them captive. So he ends up going and pretty much taking the child back, puts the child in Amy's car, and they're trying to like run away from the situation, but I think they end up getting caught. And then Isaac and one of his guys just kind of put Danny and Paul in like this back area of the house, and they're trying to get out, and Paul manages to get up, but Danny couldn't get up there. So he's just trying to tell Paul, like, go on without me, I'm holding you down anyway in life and just everything in general. Just go, live your life, I'm good here. Basically, Paul, you know, he's just like stubborn. He's like, no, I'm not gonna leave you. And we find out that Danny actually sabotaged Paul's life by not sending his college letters or applications to the colleges that he was applying for. At first, he had thought he just got declined, you know, like he just didn't get accepted to any of the schools that he tried to go out for. But Danny actually decided to just take all of his letters and put them in the trash. Like, they never even got received. So he really, really hurt his brother. Paul ended up leaving, but then he heard, you know, Danny heard gunshots, so he thought Paul was dead. The police ended up finding Danny, Amy, and Naomi. Of course, Jordan's dead because she got cut in half by the escape room door. It's crazy. But eventually, everybody gets released after they get their stories. Amy just sees Danny, and she's just like, you, like, why are you still out? You caused all of this. Because we find out that Amy's husband George decided to just up and leave Amy, like took the daughter, just left. I think there was a letter that he sent to basically say, hey, you know, I think it's better for her to just live with me. I want custody and I want a divorce. So she was mad at Danny, just wanted to take all her anger out on him, just like, you're the reason why my life is the way that it is. And yeah, they end up driving off into the desert. They drove off of this cliff and they pretty much end up in, you know, this crash scenario at the bottom of the cliff. So they wake up. Amy is having issues with her ankle. She happens to find her gun. Danny's trying to keep his distance because he's just like, I hate you. They both kind of ruined each other's lives. Okay, Danny's own, I think, it already sucked, but it was even worse now. Amy, I think for sure, was kind of like the biggest loser in this situation, if I'm going to be honest. Amy, she finds her gun. She's just like, you know, we need to stick together, yada yada. And Danny just decides to kind of give her a piggyback ride. But eventually, I think they had some type of tussle and Danny tries to grab the gun and she's thinking, oh, you're gonna shoot me. And basically she breaks Danny's arm, so he couldn't even carry her anymore. It was so dumb. I'm like, you just shot yourself in the foot. They had to end up just sitting there. They also tried to eat some berries. She really didn't know what she was doing. Amy tried to tell him like, hey, get these berries, but they end up getting some type of poisonous thing, but thankfully they didn't die. But they did have a pretty much very strange euphoric type of reaction to it right after, of course, throwing up for like a couple hours straight. Finally end up making it out of the desert, and first person we see is actually George, Amy's husband. It blacks out here, but you could tell he shoots Danny. We just see Danny in a hospital bed with Amy next to him, and it pretty much closes out with her in the bed with Danny, and she just is cuddling with him, and it's so weird. I'm like, didn't you hate this man? So like I said, had a euphoric session, and I think maybe at that moment they kind of had more to say to each other than just a, I hate you, you know what I mean? It seems as though they actually got to connect in a weird way. And I remember when George had, you know, this is before George found out that Danny was the guy that Amy was having issues with, but when George and Danny were friends, George invited Danny over to their house, and Danny's just having this conversation with Amy about life and, you know, how she feels after selling her business and making that multi-million-dollar deal with Jordan. Like, how does it feel? Like, is it any better? Is life any better? Are you less stressed? You know what I mean? And you could tell he was really looking for like a genuine like yes, you know, but she couldn't give that to him. And it was just kind of like, wow, you're working this hard but for nothing, it seems, you know what I mean? So there was little bits and pieces here and there that made you think that the show was a lot deeper than I think maybe it initially came off as. So it was really weird. It was a really weird experience because it really just snowballs. Like, how do you go from a parking lot argument, well, not really even a verbal argument because she just beeps her horn and, you know, flicks him off, but how do you go from flicking somebody off to a car chase to try and pay somebody off to then now losing your child, losing your husband, losing your marriage? And then also on Danny's side, you know, like, he didn't really have much to lose, let's be honest, but it was so many things that he was trying to do and really trying to get his life together. But it seemed like every time he would start to get somewhere, something would happen. It's just like, gosh darn it, do I understand that? You know what I mean? It just feels like every time you try to get somewhere, something happens. You know what I mean? It just doesn't work out. It's very interesting to see two different people from two different sides of things like come together and learn about each other, and it's very interesting. I'd like to see, because this was just the first season, but I would like to see where they take possibly the second season, what storyline they're going to go with. There were some comments in some of the reviews, like videos that I watched about it. They were talking about how it came across as kind of like racist, you know, towards white people. And obviously there were some comments made by Danny, you know, because he thought that Paul originally was dating a white chick, but we find out that it was actually Amy catfishing him in the end, but he didn't really know that yet. So Paul, he's talking to supposedly Mia, the white girl, the assistant, and obviously Danny's just like, you're supposed to marry a Korean girl, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do what our parents said. And Paul's just looking at him like, look at where doing exactly what you were told every day of your life has gotten you, like nowhere. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, at some point you gotta live your life for you, you know? So yeah. But yeah, y'all let me know what your thoughts are on this show. I know this is a pretty lengthy one, but I kind of wanted to go into some detail about the storyline and the little action pockets here and there that I thought was interesting. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.